And we are back here on Reason and Theology with another exciting debate. Did the universe have a beginning with Phil Bear and modern atheism? This is going to be absolutely exciting. Really looking forward to this. And we have a returning guest here, Dale, who is going to be hosting and all that. I'm just simply here to facilitate. And also, I'll grab the chat questions towards the very end. But pretty much I'm going to get out of the way, let these gentlemen do their thing, and go ahead and pass it over to you, Dale, if you want to introduce the gentlemen, and we'll begin.
Yeah. Thank you so much for facilitating this, Mike. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to this because I actually hosted both Phil and Juan on my channel for another debate on the existence of God, and it went really well. So I think it'll be an interesting topic for you two to debate on Mike's channel here. But just for the audience, before we get into today's topic and stuff, do you guys want to each? This is both of your first time on the Reason and Theology podcast, so Phil, I just want to turn it over to you. Do you just want to take a few minutes to kind of introduce the audience as to who you are and your background and anything you want to share?
Yeah, well, I am actually, I grew up in Iowa. I'm the son of a Methodist minister. I grew up in a Christian home. I went to the University of Iowa and studied philosophy and logic, formal logic, and epistemology and technology, all sorts of things like that, and probably studied more than I can probably do justice to. That was a while ago, so it's hard to remember like all the Greek philosophy that I studied and all those kinds of things. But it comes back to me when I try to get into discussion, and I can kind of refresh myself ahead of time. But my professors at University of Iowa were all atheists, and they pretty much twisted my faith into a pretzel, and which they do on a routine basis with Christians who are in their classes. And so I had a crisis of faith, and my mother panicked because I was beginning to doubt my faith and doubt the existence of God and my Christianity. And so her friends said, "Why don't you send him a book by a Christian philosopher? Maybe that'll help." And so she did. She sent me a book by a guy named Francis Schaeffer, who is really one of my Christian philosopher heroes now. And that book changed my life. And so ever since then, I have pursued studies in philosophy, theology, metaphysics, epistemology, and so on, and especially formal logic. And much of the work that I've done is I've just been doing on my own as an autodidact. So I'm kind of a mutt. I'm kind of a combination of university training and self-directed cross-disciplinary study over the course of 50 years. So I'm really old.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you on board on the channel. I know you'll do a great job in the debate here. So obviously that's Phil. He's representing the Christian or theist side, but on the atheist side, we also have Juan from modern atheism. So hey, Juan, first, I just want to turn it to you if you want to give an introduction to who you are and a bit about your background there.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, my name is Juan. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Modern Atheism. Contrary to what the channel says, I am actually an agnostic. Yeah, the channel, I deal with topics such as the existence of God or the resurrection of Jesus from a skeptical perspective. For example, next week, early the Tuesday, I'm going to be having Richard Carrier on the channel, and we're going to take a look at the topic of gospel reliability. And a few days ago, I had James Fodor, a known resurrection skeptic. So I also like to invite people, and also I do sometimes I do debates. I want to start with more debates and inviting people to the channel. So yeah, if you're interested in stuff like that, please go check it out and consider subscribing.
Awesome. Yeah, so it's going to be a great debate. As the audience knows, the topic is: did the universe have a beginning in the finite past, or is it past eternal? And the format for the debate that the two guys have agreed upon is: so we're going to have a 5-minute opening each, followed by a 10-minute rebuttal period each. Then we're going to go to 15-minute cross-examinations on each side, followed by 30 to 40 minutes of informal free dialogue between the two, and then closing off with 2 5-minute closings before Mike will come back and we'll go to audience questions. So that's the plan for today. And yeah, I guess on that front, Phil, we'll start with you to give your 5-minute opening there. So,
okay. Well, thanks so much for having me, and I really appreciated and enjoyed our earlier debate with Juan. And I want to encourage you, Juan, because I think you are already a great debater. And the reason that I say that is because you have mastered the most important debating skill that anyone can have, and that is humility, thoughtfulness, respectfulness, and just high character. You're not arrogant, you're not cocky, and so I just so much appreciate and enjoy having discourse with you because you're so open-minded, but you also articulate your beliefs and your positions well. And so that combination, I think, makes you an ideal debater, and I really enjoy having these discussions with you. So I appreciate that very much. But I will open my beginning with my standard concession speech that I will make right away. And that is that before I present my case, I again concede this debate before it begins. Not because I lack arguments, but because winning a debate is not my ultimate goal. And if I'm focused on victory, then I'm going to be distracted from what really matters to me, which is the pursuit of truth. So I'm not here to collect rhetorical points or impress people, with clever turns of phrase. I'm here because these questions are the most important ones that people can face, and I think it deserves honesty, clarity, and rigorous reasoning. So if this exchange brings us even one step closer to truth, as I always say, it will have been worthwhile. And I believe that will happen. So the claim that the universe is eternal faces two decisive objections. And I'm going to present those two. One of them is grounded in the logic of time, and the other is in the metaphysics of contingency. So each argument taken by itself establishes that the universe must have had a beginning. And together they form a cumulative case that the idea of an eternal universe is logically incoherent. So the first argument is the impossibility of an infinite past. So time as we experience it is not static, but dynamic. The present moment continually arrives as prior moments pass away. This feature of temporal reality, what philosophers call tensed time, means that the present is reached through the successive addition of earlier moments. But this has profound implications. If time has no beginning, then an actual infinite number of moments must have elapsed prior to the present moment. And that is logically impossible. An actual infinite cannot be traversed by successive addition. If there was an infinite regress of past moments, the present could never arrive because the sequence leading to it would never have been completed. To claim otherwise is to assert that one has crossed an infinite distance step by step, which is self-contradictory. It would be like trying to emerge from a pit that has no bottom. No matter how long one climbs, one never reaches the top because there was never a starting point. Yet the present moment has arrived. We're here. So this means that the sequence of past moments cannot be infinite. Therefore, time itself must have had a first moment, a beginning. And since the universe exists within time and is measured by it, the beginning of time entails the beginning of the universe. The universe cannot be eternal in the past because an infinite temporal regress is impossible, logically impossible. So argument two, the contingency of the universe. Independently of the problem of an infinite past, the universe also reveals itself to be contingent. To say that something is contingent is to say that its existence is not necessary. It could have failed to exist. A necessary reality, by contrast, exists by the necessity of its own nature and cannot not exist. The universe, however, is not like that. It changes, expands, and is subject to decay. Its properties and conditions are not fixed. They are dependent on preceding states. Every aspect of it is characterized by dependency. Something that depends on a prior condition for its present state cannot be necessary because its existence is conditioned by factors outside of itself. So if the universe is contingent, then it cannot exist without a cause. Contingent realities, by definition, do not explain their own existence. They require an explanation in terms of something beyond them. To say that a contingent reality has no cause is to empty the word contingent of meaning. So from this, it follows that the universe, being contingent, must have had a cause. And if it had a cause, it cannot be eternal. Eternity and contingency are mutually exclusive categories. That which is eternal has no cause and no beginning, and that which is contingent necessarily depends on something prior. A caused universe cannot be eternal, and an eternal universe cannot be caused. Since the universe is contingent and caused, it must have had a beginning. So my conclusion is the argument from the impossibility of an infinite past shows that time cannot stretch back forever. And the argument from contingency shows that the universe cannot exist necessarily and therefore cannot exist eternally. Each argument leads to the same conclusion. The universe began to exist.
All right. All right. So I'm going to turn over. That's the 5 minutes. So I'll turn to Juan for your 5-minute opening. Just let me know when you're ready. And also, do you guys want me to give you like a 1 minute when there's 1 minute left? Do you want me to signal you, or you guys are good just for the time to go up?
Yeah, I think I'm good. Yeah.
You can signal me if you want to. That'll keep me from rambling.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can signal me.
Okay. At the 1 minute mark. All right. Cool. So I will as soon as you're ready, Juan, I'll start your countdown for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay. So first, to clarify, in this debate, I'm not going to defend the strong position, the strong claim that the universe is beginningless. Rather, I want to defend the weaker claim that the universe could have no beginning. So in other words, that it is possible that it has no beginning. And for that, I'm going to turn to modern physics. I think in light of contemporary physics, it is perfectly plausible that our universe is actually beginningless. Now, many people will immediately say, okay, what about the Big Bang theory? Isn't this a beginning for the universe? Well, no, actually it's not. The only thing that the Big Bang theory says strictly is that almost 14 billion years ago, the universe, as we see it, was in a hot, dense state, and it expanded from it. It doesn't say that the universe at that point began to exist from a previous point of not existing, of like that there was a philosophical nothingness before that. So here is my important point. Various cosmological models, this is from Daniel Linford, who had a debate with Adrian Locke. Various cosmological models, such as loop quantum gravity or Julian Barber's approach to canonical quantum gravity, have suggested that physical reality could include a timeless aspect. If physical reality has a timeless aspect, and if timeless entities do not begin to exist, then ultimate physical reality could not have a beginning. So I want to make a distinction between the observable universe and ultimate physical reality, which is they are not like exactly identical. Or everything that the universe that we see is not like it could be more. There could be more things that exist, right? Okay, so science tells us that non-beginningless models of the universe are plausible. Now, what about philosophy? Can philosophy tell us if the universe is infinite? Now, some philosophers tell us that philosophy indeed can rule out an infinite past. And the usual way to go about it, they go about it through various paradoxes, such as Hilbert's Hotel or the Green Reaper paradox. I think the first philosopher was Al-Ghazali in the 11th century, who had an idea about a paradox involving the orbits of Jupiter and Saturn. Now, there have been some responses to that from philosophers such as Alex Malpass, and what they say is that these paradoxes haven't truly shown a real logical contradiction involving actual infinites. They have only managed to show some weird things or absurd situations, things that seem very unintuitive to us, but that's just because the nature of the infinite is so unintuitive. It's not, but what they say is a true logical contradiction hasn't been shown, and therefore it hasn't been really shown that an infinite past or an infinite sequence is actually impossible. Now, to end this, I want to read something quickly about a B theory of time. There is an A theory of time, which time goes from past, present to future. There is also something called a B theory of time. William Lane Craig says this: on a B theory of time, the universe does not in fact come into being or become actual at the Big Bang. It just exists tenseless as a four-dimensional space-time block that is finitely extended in the earlier than direction. If time is tenseless, then the universe never really comes into being, and therefore the quest for a cause of its coming into being is misconceived. So it's just to say that on a B theory of time, then the universe can be seen as beginningless, and this is a plausible way to see time. There's many philosophers and physics that adopt this theory. So that's all from my side.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Phil, at this point, we'll go to the rebuttal round. And for this round, you'll have 10 minutes. And I'll just do, the virtual. I don't know how I'll signal you. I'll put up my hand like that at 1 minute when you have 1 minute left. All right.
Okay.
So just let me know when you're ready and I'll start the countdown.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah. So Juan is telling us that physical reality could have a timeless existence, and that is a scientific claim, if I understand what you were talking about correctly, right? And so that raises an immediate question, and that is that where is the scientific evidence? Where is the scientific empirical evidence that physical reality could have a timeless existence? And I have read about these theories before, and whenever I have read about them, I have never heard any evidence presented, any scientific empirical evidence presented that would lead to the conclusion that physical reality can have a timeless existence. In other words, space and time, or space and matter, can exist without time. And so and by the way, I'm not omniscient, so someone may have presented scientific empirical evidence that physical reality could have a timeless existence, and I haven't heard about it. So if that's the case, and if you're familiar with some of that scientific evidence, then I would be extremely interested in hearing about it. But unless someone can present scientific empirical evidence that physical reality can have a timeless existence, then it remains in the category of begging the question. And so this is an example of many scientific claims that atheists or agnostics or non-theists often present, and that is that they present the idea that, for example, that given enough time, evolution could produce thinking beings and beings with consciousness. But there's no scientific evidence that given enough time that could occur. And so it is an article of faith on the part of the non-theist. And I would put this idea that physical reality can have a timeless existence in the same category. Unless there is empirical evidence to support it, then it remains a faith answer. And it's ironic that it could be a faith answer like that, because theists, and Christians in particular, are constantly criticized for putting forth assertions where they believe something by faith without any evidence. But I see these same claims coming from the non-theists and some of these atheistic scientists who say that things like reality could have a timeless existence, and they're just as much based on faith as what they say Christians and theists are basing their ideas on. So the fact that they're scientifically plausible is a claim. It's not an argument. That's simply a claim. And that claim needs to be supported by evidence. And if you want to say something is scientifically plausible, you have to give me evidence that something is scientifically plausible. Otherwise, it remains in the domain of faith. And so that's kind of the general idea, the general approach that I have for for claims like that. As far as the B theory as time is concerned, that's also a matter of faith, because we experience time in a tensed fashion. And so to claim that time is tenseless is to go against human experience. And that human experience can be said to be empirical experience, because I empirically experience the fact that something happened yesterday and that there may be something that will happen tomorrow that has not happened yet. If time is tenseless, then before and after are meaningless categories, but human experience demonstrates that they are not meaningless categories. They are actually meaningful. So I think the B theory of time is itself a faith answer, and I think it's itself an unscientific theory. So my overall attitude about all these things is, these are claims. I'm not hearing evidence to support these claims, but if there is evidence, then I'm certainly willing to listen to it.
All right. You still have 5 minutes, so you're good to give that up, or?
No, I'm good.
All right, cool. So, Juan,
I can tell a joke.
Juan, I'll turn it over to you for your 10-minute rebuttal section, 10 minute or less, whatever you want to use. Again, yeah. And you don't want me to signal you when you have 1 minute left. Is that correct? Or
well, you can signal me if you want. I think it's good. I think it's okay to because then I will finish the point, right? I think it's good.
Sounds good. So I'll just raise my hand when you have 1 minute left. All right. So 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay. So the first question. Okay, what is the evidence that reality could be timeless? Now here is the thing. We have to distinguish between two propositions. One is that something is timeless. For example, I'm saying something is timeless or was timeless. And the second is saying something could be timeless. It is possible. X is possible and X is. I think one needs strong evidence for the first one, the first kind of claims. Like if I'm saying the universe was timeless, I think, yeah, you need good evidence for that. But merely to say something is possible, I think, yeah, maybe one needs evidence. For example, in this case, it goes strongly against our intuition. So maybe one needs evidence, but I think it's less, because to say that something is possible, the way I see it, as long as there is no logical contradiction involved in that, right? Or as long as it doesn't directly contradict a known data point, some known information, then it is possible, right? You don't need a lot of strong evidence. Now, these models, I also forgot to say, there is also another model called the cyclical Big Bang model. Say our Big Bang was, before our Big Bang was a big crunch, and before that another Big Bang, and it goes infinite, but it will go into the realm of what he say about an infinite series being impossible. But that's another model for the universe. Now, what's the evidence for these models? I think it does have some evidence. It's based on math. It's the idea behind it is okay, we start assuming these models, we see where does the equation lead us, and we see, okay, does these results match some of the results that we see? And to the degree that it does, and it requires more or less ad hoc assumptions or theories, then the model matches better. And then if a model matches reality really good and makes really good predictions, then you can say, okay, that's it. That's the evidence that the model is correct, right? But okay, I mean, ultimately, to be honest, I cannot tell you on which evidence, for example, quantum loop theory, on which scientific evidence led to that. To be honest, I don't know. I can read something I have about it. It simply says that you describe it as a timeless theory because the fundamental equation does not include a time variable, and it proposes that space-time is discrete, made of interconnected loops, and that time is an emergent phenomenon arising from the relationship and interaction between these fundamental structures. Now, I was just watching a video about it. To be perfectly honest, I don't know what data led to this model, but I mean, there probably was some. I don't know. Maybe you could say, okay, that's just having faith in scientists. At the moment, I don't have it. Maybe I could search it out, but I think it will be very hard to do right live. But I bet there is some things. Okay, what about B theory of time? Okay, B theory of time, I think has some good evidence. Let me read you again something about it. A philosopher, Balashov, says this. Presentism is the A theory of time, and eternalism is the B theory of time. As he's saying, despite the fact that presentism has the free backing of common sense and eternalism revolts against it, eternalism is widely regarded as almost the default view in contemporary debates and presents a highly problematic view. And one of the evidence for this is evidence from relativity, from general relativity. There is something that special and general relativity are easier to explain in a B theory of time. I will read something here. According to the relativity of simultaneity, observers in different frames of reference can have different measurements of whether a given pair of events happen at the same time or at different times. So the idea is this something very weird, like an event, it seems like it happened at two different times. Like it's very weird to explain under an A theory of time, and it's better explained under a B theory of time. And this is something that I read about B theory of time in Wikipedia, and many philosophers say that it explains relativity better than the A theory of time. So that will be a piece of evidence. Now, what he says about our experience of time passing, it's not goes against the B theory of time, right? What they say is that this thing that we experience is an illusion caused by the structure of time, that the fact that time is a dimension in the entire manifold, and we experience something illusionary. That's the way they word it. Yeah. I think I have a few minutes. So what about the idea that you cannot have an infinite past? Because like the idea is that, for example, we have today, and today there was another day, and before that there was another day, and the series is infinite. And the idea, what they say is that you cannot traverse an infinite past, but the way I see it, this kind of assumes a beginning point and saying, okay, you cannot traverse it. If it's infinite, you cannot traverse it until the present. But if there is no beginning, then there's not a problem. It's just saying before this day there was another day, and then there was another day, and then there was another day, and there is no logical problem with that. And what Alex Malpass says is that actually, yes, you can traverse an infinite amount of events if you have infinite time. So in infinite time, you will indeed traverse an infinite amount of past events. So it's no logical problem with that, right? So yeah, well, the analogy about, like, I didn't really get, maybe we can talk about this later. What's the analogy of the bottomless pit? Like, the idea is there is the pit does have an end. What doesn't have is a beginning. I mean, the point is you have always been climbing, and the point you are climbing at the moment is the end. It's always the end. The point you're climbing, and you have always been climbing infinitely. There was no beginning. You didn't have to start from anywhere. So yeah, to wrap it up, like what Alex Malpass says on this, and other philosophers, is that there is no logical problem with an infinite series that is closed in the end point but open at the beginning point. That is perfectly logically possible, and you don't need to. You can traverse it if you have an infinite amount of time. That's what they say about this. That's enough.
All right, thank you very much. So, all right, so at this point, we're going to go to the 15-minute cross-examine period each. So, Phil, you're going to have 15 minutes to cross-examine Juan. So you'll ask him questions. Juan, you'll be answering those questions. So, yep. Are you guys ready to begin?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so I'm hitting it in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay. Well, I haven't actually prepared some specific questions in advance because I didn't know what you were going to say today. So I'm going to have to kind of just frame my questions off the cuff here, if you don't mind. So it might appear a little bit disorganized, but if you'll forgive me for that, then we'll be good. So what you're saying, Juan, is that there is a difference between is versus could be, and that you're making a weaker claim that the universe could be eternal, and you're trying to avoid making the stronger claim that it actually is eternal.
Yeah, timeless. I say timeless instead of eternal. I don't. They use the word timeless. So I don't, yeah.
Okay. Well, so you'll forgive me. I could be wrong about this. This could be a mistake on my part, but I usually consider timeless and eternal to be interchangeable terms. So, and if you would want to give me a distinction between those two that makes them not interchangeable, then I would certainly consider whatever suggestion you might have there. But I prefer to use the word eternal, because eternal means that it is without time, that it is timeless, that it stretches back to an infinite past, and it goes to an infinite future, and there's simply no measurable time involved. And so, but if you wanted to say that it's timeless, then I can use that terminology if you prefer. But you said that there is a model that demonstrates what you said, that it's plausible that these claims could be true. And so my question is there a model that demonstrates the plausibility of a timeless universe or an infinite past? Is there a scientific model that demonstrates the plausibility of that? And let me back up a little bit, and let me just give you a little bit of a context for my question. Whenever a scientist or philosopher claims that something is plausible, at that point, they're not actually required to present evidence that something is true. What they need to do is present a model that demonstrates that whatever they're claiming is plausible. So actuality requires evidence. A strong claim requires evidence. Plausibility requires a model that can demonstrate that it is plausible, that it's possible. And so my question would be, what scientific model is there that you can point to that demonstrates the plausibility of a timeless universe, and pretty much any of these claims, the claims of the B theory of time, and so on?
Yes, I think one of those models will be the quantum loop gravity model. As I said, it's a model that it takes the universe as fundamentally a timeless entity, and then says that time is a feature that arises out of the interactions between quantum loops. Is words, but it takes it as a timeless state. And I think the standard model, I think, poses an infinite time or a timeless state in which the universe is stationary, followed by an inflation period. It's called the emergent universe model. I think it's the standard model. It's actually, it doesn't say like there was an absolute nothingness in the philosophical sense, then bam, the universe popped out of existence. Rather, it says like the universe had an early state in a timeless sense, of an infinite time, or in a timeless state, and later on an expansion took place. I think I've also heard about cyclic models. These are real. These are I've seen videos with explaining the math or the ideas behind the cyclic models, where this Big Bang was preceded by another Big Bang, and so on, and it goes infinitely. Now, it doesn't demonstrate that they're actually true, but I think it is proven. It's taken as proven that they are possible. I don't know if that's where, but I think it sounds to me that is the case, right?
Okay, so my question is really a deeper question. The question is, when I say, is there a model that demonstrates the plausibility of those claims? To say that the model demonstrates the plausibility of a claim, you have to explain how the model demonstrates the plausibility of that claim. So to simply present a model and describe the model is much different than explaining how that model actually demonstrates the plausibility of the claim or the theory or the hypothesis. Does that make sense, Juan?
I'm not sure if it makes sense. I'm not sure if I get what you're saying. As long as the model, I think, is not self-contradictory, or it doesn't contradict some known data in an obvious way, then one could say the model is at least possible. Because I mean, you have to, I mean, if anything is the other way around, to say this is more or less impossible, one would have to show why. Why is the mistake? You don't have to show, like, I think anything. There is a philosopher saying that anything that is mathematically coherent is also metaphysically possible. It's a Louis Swinburne or something like that. So I will agree with that. Say that if these models, if the math is coherent, and then as long as this is achieved, then it is at least possible and possible model, I would say.
Okay. Well, so what you're describing there is you're describing a state where there are no defeaters to that model. That's really basically what you're saying. Is that you're saying that the model doesn't contradict any known scientific empirical claim or hypothesis, even whatever. But when I ask how does the model demonstrate the plausibility of a claim, I'm not asking if there are any defeaters to that model. And I'm not asking you if there are no defeaters to that model. What I'm asking is, how does the model positively demonstrate plausibility? And that's much, much different from asking, are there any defeaters to that model? You can clear a model by eliminating the defeaters first, but you still haven't accomplished the objective of demonstrating how that model actually supports plausibility. Those are two very different things. And so what I'm hearing from you is there doesn't seem to be any defeaters, but that's really not the question I'm asking. The question is, how does the model positively demonstrate plausibility?
Okay, let me ask, what is the difference between plausibility and logical possibility? What do you think is like the difference there?
Well, I don't know that there's much of a difference between the two, but this is me asking you questions, So
okay, yes, okay, yeah, right, that's right. Okay. So yeah, how do you show? Yeah, the things I'm not exactly sure what is meant by plausible. So for the way I see it, as long as there is no contradiction, like I said, then a proposal is possible, right? It's logically possible. And how do you prove that it's possible where you don't have to prove that something is possible? Like I say, if anything, one has to prove that something is impossible. I think something that doesn't involve an obvious contradiction, as long as it doesn't do that, then it's always possible and requires no demonstration. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so let me move on. Let's see, you say that there are models that match reality. And my question is, what reality do they match?
Presumably will be the observed data about the universe, like microwave radiation, what we observe on the quantum level, relative experiments about data that we observe in relativity experiments, data about the universe. That data they match, they can predict it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it sounds like another way of saying that there are no defeaters, that they match what we already see, in the sense that they don't contradict what we already see. And that's not quite the same thing. But I'm not sure that there's anything more that you would want to say about it. If you want to say more about that, you can. But if not, then I'll go on to my next question.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have anything to add here. I'm not sure if the two things are exactly the same, like that we start with this model, and we show that this model can predict some aspects can explain some aspects of reality. That's not exactly the same as saying, I mean, some aspect, not all aspects. That's not exactly the same as saying that there has no difference. Maybe there is one aspect of reality that is very hard to explain in this model, that it doesn't explain, and that's a problem. Some models do have problems. None of them are considered like, there's not one of them that everyone agreed that's the good model. It's an open question.
Okay. So time, scientific explanations and theories, they have to have a property of what they call risk. So philosophers of science will tell you that if a scientific hypothesis is to be credible, then it has to be risky. And what it means by that is that it has to claim that it is the only explanation that fits the data that is being observed. And if another explanation, if a competing theory or a competing hypothesis also is consistent with the data being observed, then that particular observation is irrelevant. And it's not a risky observation. And I'm not hearing anything that's risky about these explanations. In other words, I'm not hearing anything that is not compatible with the actual competing theories for these conclusions. So that's kind of partly what I'm getting at. To say that something is plausible, that's a relatively easy. There's no risk involved in saying that something is possible or something is plausible. Either one, even if there's a difference between the two. And if you're not taking any risks, then I'm not. I don't want to put it in a way that is offensive, but I'm not sure how else to put it. I'm not very impressed by an explanation that doesn't take any risks. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So the next question is, you say that time is an imagined phenomenon, and that the ideas of before and after are imaginary. And my question is, what evidence can you present that supports the idea that time-intensed reality is imaginary?
Yeah, the evidence for the B theory of time is, like I said, has a lot to do with special and general relativity, and how it can explain this better than an A theory of time. Because what the B theory of time is saying is that the past and the future, that sounds crazy, but they actually do exist. Like ontologically, they are there. It's just like, for example, here, like asking where is China? Well, China is somewhere else, right? It's far away. So where is the future? The future is also far away, but in the dimension of time. But it is there. It actually does exist in a way. And the evidence for this, something about relativity. There was some experiments that explain this better. And I think, what was it? There are some very weird things about time that are very unintuitive. Time dilation is one of them. This is a demonstrated phenomenon. This is everyone agrees that this happens. And it's like that an object perceives the passage of time is different for the object relative to the speed, to how fast it's going. Like there is a famous experiment, how there are two twins. One of them goes on a trip and is spinning, traveling very fast. And when he comes back to the Earth, if 20 years have passed for this person, like 10 years have passed for this person, something like that. It's very crazy when you think about it. It's really very difficult to explain according to a classical theory of time. And B theory of times kind of explain this.
So my question is, are you aware that general and special relativity have to do with reaching boundary conditions? Are you familiar with boundary conditions?
Not really.
So when you talk about something approaching the speed of light, for example, if something approaches the speed of light, it's approaching a boundary condition. And that's what scientists refer to whenever they talk about time dilatation and the various weird phenomena that may occur under relativity, but we are not approaching boundary conditions, and so it's kind of incoherent to say that time is not tensed for us just because some object can theoretically approach a boundary condition like the speed of light and begin to bend time and things like that. These are extremely odd and non-normative conditions that you're talking about. And so in order to say that B theory of time actually explains normal human existence and explains the behavior of physical matter, you would have to demonstrate that physical matter is constantly approaching these boundary conditions. And to me, I would put that also in the category of a faith answer, because you would have to have a lot of faith to actually. I'm sorry, what, Dale?
We are out of time. Do you just have a question, and I'll let Juan answer, and then I do have to switch because the 15 minutes used up.
Well, I was trying to frame this explanation as a question, to asking Juan if he's familiar with boundary conditions and familiar with the fact that boundary conditions would have to be at least approached in order for these exceptions to actually occur. And my question is there scientific evidence that these boundary conditions are constantly being approached in order to explain the movement of physical matter and the movement of time in the universe? Sorry about that. I was kind of clumsy in how I worded all that. You're very patient with me, Juan. I appreciate it.
No, that's great. Thank you. No. Oh, yeah, I forgot to thank you for the nice things you said at the beginning. I wanted to do it in the opening, but I forgot. Okay. Just to quickly respond to that, time dilation not only happens close to the speed of light. You can see the effects. The effects are more visible close to the speed of light, but they actually happen at lower speeds. And I just watching videos about it. It has been observed in the Earth. In Earth, they put atomic clocks in high-speed jets. It's not they go very fast, the jets, but they don't go close to the speed of light. And you can actually see the phenomena happening. They put a clock in the jet that goes very fast, and another identical clock like in it, and you can see the phenomena. You can actually also see it. So it's more visible at speeds close to the speed of light, but it happens to a lesser degree at lower speeds actually. So it's not just close to the boundary condition.
Awesome.
Okay, well, I have a lot to say about that, but this is my question and answer time, so I don't want to give you those comments right now. I'll save that for the general discussion.
No problem. So yeah, we at this point we'll switch to Juan. This is your cross-examining, so you'll ask the questions, and Phil try to restrict to giving the answers to those. So are you guys both ready to go?
How long?
I'm ready.
It was 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, 15 minutes. And I'll try again. The virtual background blocks it, but I try to raise my hand when you have 1 minute left. But yeah, are you guys ready to go?
I'm ready to dodge questions as soon as Juan's ready to ask them.
All right, cool. So 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, I really want to cover both arguments. The argument for the past can be infinite, because in a way it does seem very intuitive to me. Like if the past is infinite, how did we reach the present? I do get the same idea. Like I get the same intuition. How is this possible? And I was asking many people about this in my channel. Alex Malpas tried to walk me through it, but I found it very hard to understand. So maybe you can walk me through the objection. Like, okay, why exactly is it that we're in the present, right? I said there is an infinite moment of time. An infinite amount of events in the past, right? Or an infinite time. Why is it that we never reach the present? What exactly the problem there?
The problem is that the domain between the present moment and the infinite past is an infinite domain.
Domain? What is a domain? Here, you mean length? You mean
a length? Whatever.
Length.
Yeah. So let me say it again, because this is really the most important part, probably the most important proposition in this argument. the time or the distance, however you want to call it, whatever you want to. And I prefer to use the word domain, but if you want to use the word distance or whatever, that's fine too. But the general principle and the basic principle is that the domain or the distance between the present moment and the infinite past is an infinite domain. It's an infinite distance, if you will. I don't like the word distance, but if that works better for you, then I'll use it. But I use it with a little bit of caution. So if the distance between the present moment and the infinite past is infinite, then for time to actually reach the present moment would be the traversal of an infinite domain. Because between the present moment and the infinite past, that stretch, that distance, that domain is infinite. It's infinite by definition, because we're calling it an infinite past. If it's an infinite past, it's an infinite past. It's infinite. You cannot cross from one point to another where the line is infinite.
Yeah. Okay.
The infinite past has no beginning. And if it has no beginning, it can't stretch back to an infinite past and yet progress in the opposite direction forward to the present moment. Because it could never even get started, first of all. And secondly, in order to reach the present moment, it would have to cross an infinite domain, and crossing an infinite domain is logically impossible, not scientifically impossible, but logically impossible. So if the universe...
Sorry. What is the contradiction in that? When you say logically impossible, there has to be a contradiction. What is the contradiction in that? Exactly.
Well, the contradiction is that time cannot, that you cannot traverse an infinite domain, but for the present moment to arrive, an infinite domain has to have been traversed. So that's a contradiction. Okay. An infinite domain has been traversed, but an infinite domain cannot be traversed. So that's where the logical incoherence is. So it's logically impossible to traverse an infinite domain, because by definition, infinity cannot be traversed. If it can be traversed, it's not infinity. Okay. And if it's infinity, it cannot be traversed. You can't go from one end to the other when there is no end on either side, or even on one side.
Yeah.
So you can't move from an infinite past, because there is no starting point in an infinite past by definition. Therefore, you can't move from an infinite past forward to the present moment, because that's an infinite domain, and an infinite domain cannot be crossed or traversed. But it would have to be traversed in order for the present moment to arrive.
Right. Well, the way you word things there, it almost feels like there is a beginning and it's infinitely far from the present, from the end. But it's not, the scenario is not that. The scenario is not that it's a beginning, because you say between, right? Rich travels between this and that. The between implies a beginning and an end, but there is no beginning. So there is no, what's happening is not like, it's not a traversing going on. It's just that the past, there is an infinite series. The present moment exists, and before that there is another moment, and before that there is a moment, and it goes so on, and infinitely. So I don't know if, by the way, something that Alex Malpass says about this is that actually you can traverse an infinite. You can do it in an infinite amount of time. So if you have an infinite amount of, if you have 30 seconds, you traverse 30 events, for example.
Okay, so you're I'm sorry, Juan, but you're offering commentary in a question and answer series. And so I think what we should do is save the discussion until the actual discussion time, because right now you're editorializing, and I'm simply answering your questions.
Oh yeah, I'm supposed to ask questions. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't mean to be rude. I just want to try to keep to our structure here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
And I can repeat the principle
Okay.
if it's not very clear.
Yeah,
because it's a very important one. So if you'd like me to if you'd like me to repeat it and clarify it, I can do that.
Sure.
If you want to ask that as a question.
Yes. But do you think, let's just start with this. Do you think that an actual infinite can exist? An infinite can be actually in reality?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I see. That's great.
But there's two answers to that question. First of all, I think that that an actual infinite as opposed to a potential infinite can exist and does exist. But the second answer to that question, or the second part of the answer, is that if the universe had no beginning, and if that's the claim that's being made, then that is a claim for an actual infinite. And so what I do is I turn the tables on the inquisitor at that point, because if someone asks me if an actual infinite actually exists, and we're arguing, and they're presenting an argument that time stretches back to an infinite past, they're the ones who are making the claim of the actual infinite, not me.
Yes, that's right. I just wanted to see if we agree on that. Okay, why is it exactly that we cannot transverse an infinite? Why exactly cannot we why cannot we have an infinite time? You know what I mean?
Why can't we have an infinite time? Is that
why cannot we transverse an infinite? Like if we have an infinite amount of time to do it, why cannot we transverse an infinite?
Oh, because of that general logical principle that it is impossible to traverse an infinite domain by definition. It's not a theory. It's not some kind of empirical observation. It is a logical necessity that infinity cannot be traversed because it is infinity. The very definition of infinity rules out the possibility that one could traverse an infinite domain and go from one point on the line to another point on the line, because as soon as you talk about traversing something, you're talking about adding something, and you're talking about a progression where something is constantly being added to. In other words, if time is infinite and time that is still always being added to, then you cannot add to something that's infinite, because by definition, infinity cannot be added to. So if the numbers, for example, if the series of numbers were infinite, then you could not add one number to another, because you would be adding something more to something that cannot be added to because it's already infinite. It already doesn't have an end, and therefore you can't climb to the end of something that's infinite because it's infinite. That is the definition of infinity. So the principle is really based on the definition of infinity. It's not based on some kind of observation about how we travel, or about how time can be added to, or about how anything can progress. It's just about the fact that nothing that is infinite, if something is infinite, it cannot be added to, it cannot progress, because to progress implies that it is finite. If you can add something to something else, then what you're adding that to is finite by definition.
Yeah.
And that's why infinite time cannot progress, and therefore the present moment cannot arrive, because it would imply that a succession of moments has actually occurred, and that you can add moment to the previous moment and the next moment and you can add the next moment and the next moment and the next moment, and you can do that until the present moment arrives. But if the past is infinite, that is logically impossible. That's what I mean when I say that. Does that make sense? That help?
Yeah, I guess so, but I don't really see why you cannot add to infinite. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not supposed to refute that, or I only have to. I can only ask questions, or I don't know. I don't really get it. But when you add, what happens when you add? You can add mathematically add to an infinite. What happens is that it remains infinite, right? You add one. You can add one to infinite mathematically. You can do that. The answer is infinite, but you can't do it. It's like it's not that you can add it. You know.
Are you clarifying the principle that I articulated? Is that what you're saying right now?
I disagree with your claim that one cannot add anything to an infinite thing. Like you said that an infinite does exist. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you have in mind? Which infinite does exist?
I think there is an infinite reality, and that's what I call God. I think God is an infinite reality.
Okay. So do you think we can have like an infinite series of rocks, for example? It goes infinitely. They have rocks and it goes to the infinite. Yeah, there are infinite amount of it. Do you think that this is possible?
I don't know that there could be an infinite number of rocks.
I mean, like rocks and they just keep going and it never stops. It's just infinite, right? I mean,
when you talk about rocks or something else that you might want to place on a line, and then you ask if that line is infinite, you're really not talking about are rocks infinite or is that line of rocks infinite. You're talking about are numbers infinite because you're counting rocks. Right. And so anything that you can count cannot be infinite, because anything that you can count, you can add something to whatever you can count. If I have 5 rocks and I add another rock, I have 6 rocks. And I always have a finite number of rocks, no matter how many times I add more rocks to that line. It is still a finite line, because you cannot have an infinite regress of anything. You can't have an infinite regress of rocks. You can't have an infinite regress of time. You can't have an infinite regress of experiences. You can't have an infinite regress of causes. And that's why the argument from contingency is extremely closely related to the argument of the infinite time question. So you cannot have an infinite regress of time, because that is logically contradictory. And I notice in the chat that I'm supposedly mistaking counterintuitiveness with logical impossibility, and that's not true. I'm only talking about logical coherence. I'm not talking about any kind of intuitiveness on my part. This is something that is logically necessary, and it's based on the fact that there is a specific definition of infinity, and if we don't understand the definition of infinity, then we're going to start thinking that we can add to it. But as soon as we think that, then we have departed from the definition of infinity, and now we're talking about something that's finite. But that's not the case when you say that the universe is infinitely old, because now you're saying that the universe is infinite and not finite. And so if those two words don't have specific definitions that can be discussed, then our debate is going to be pretty much fruitless, so.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a few minutes.
So we're just out of time now, but I'll let you. Phil went a little bit over, so I'll let you ask one last question, and Phil can give one last answer, and then we'll go to the dialogue.
No, okay, maybe real quick. What if I say you are talking about the contingency and something contingent things and necessary things? Okay, if I propose this, the universe as a initial state, the initial state of the universe, or the timeless state, existed because it's necessary, and after that, all the contingent things began to exist, right? But the initial state, or the primordial state, was necessary, right? Was not contingent. What would be your objection to that?
Well, my objection would be, what is your argument that establishes the conclusion that the initial state of the universe was necessary and not contingent?
Yeah,
because the universe, as soon as you talk about a state, you're talking about contingency. States are contingent. States cannot be necessary by definition.
Really?
So you can't have a necessary state of anything, because if that state changes and becomes something else and is modified, then it is no longer necessary. It's now contingent. And so I would say that it is logically incoherent to talk about a necessary state of something, because states by definition are caused. They are not necessary. They're contingent.
Yeah, okay. Sure. We can talk about that later.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
great. So, all right. So at this point, we're going to transition. Now we have an informal dialogue and back and forth. So both sides are free to respond to each other for the next 30 minutes or so. I'll just say to both people, obviously, try your best not to interrupt people unless absolutely necessary, and also be mindful to, try to be as concise as possible to make your point, and let each side have sort of their balanced, fair say. So, are you both ready for the informal dialogue?
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
30 minutes in 3, 2, 1, go.
Go. Well, if you don't mind, I do want to start with I have an observation about our last debate
Okay.
between Juan and me, and that observation is that, Juan, I thought that you did a better job of being polite than I did.
Oh no, you did great.
And so, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But when I was getting ready for this debate today, one of the things that was going through my mind was I want to be as polite and as respectful as Juan was in the first debate, because I don't think that I was. I felt that you were more polite, more respectful, and that I thought that there were times when I was a little bit rude, and I kind of got excited and got away from myself. So I just really want to reiterate just how I look up to you as someone who is polite and has a good handle on his own self-control. And it's ironic, because Christians are supposed to be about self-control. That's one of the fruits of the Spirit in Christianity. And yet I am learning lessons in self-control from someone who is not a Christian. And so I find that kind of an interesting irony, but it's also meant to be a compliment, and it's meant to be an encouragement, for you, Juan, and that I think you do a good job with these things. So,
Appreciate it.
So I'm going to try not to get too excited this time. But if you want to start, you can. If you want to talk about some of the things that I kind of stopped you a little bit during the question and answer, and if you want to elaborate on some of those things and return to those in more of an informal discussion, then I would invite you to go ahead and do that, and then I can interact with whatever you wanted to say about those things. I didn't mean to cut you off earlier. So.
Oh no, it's okay. I get it. I don't. No, I never done this format of cross-examination, so it's not very clear to me how is cross-examination supposed to take place, as opposed to just informal back and forth. For me, it's easy, but okay, sure, it's fine.
Yeah, the cross-examination is really you ask questions and you listen to the answers, and then you ask the next question. That's my understanding. So Dale, if you have a different understanding of that, then let me know. But I think that's kind of the way. Yeah,
that's the way it's supposed to work. And this is kind of up for you guys to discuss the topic as a free conversation. So
yeah.
Okay. Here's the thing. There was a very cool blog post I read by Alex Malpass on the contingency argument. I'm gonna try to explain his point. I wish I had it on me, but I don't have time to switch it up. He says that the definition of contingency and necessary ultimately leads to a moral collapse, like it always happens. For example, here's what he says. Okay, there are facts that are contingent, and there are things that are explained by facts that are necessary. But this is what he says. If P implies Q, if P is necessary, then Q is also necessary. He's saying, like, if there is a proposition that is contingent, but this proposition is explained by a proposition that is necessary, then this proposition also becomes necessary, right? And what he was trying to say is that this somehow leads to something he calls a moral collapse, where at the end, okay, even everything is necessary, right, in a way, because if this was necessary from the existence of this, this was also necessary. I don't know, you know what I mean? I'm not sure if I can word it correctly. Maybe you get the idea behind it. I'm not sure. He's saying that, the idea of contingent and necessary is problematic. Maybe you can explain. Maybe you can say something about it, or say what is contingent, what is. Yeah.
Well, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage, and I don't want to put you to disadvantage by commenting on a blog that I haven't read.
Yeah.
But if I understand it correctly, then I think that what he's doing is he's applying the concept of contingency to logical propositions.
Yeah. Something
and
modal logic.
Yeah. And the argument from contingency that I am discussing applies contingency to ontology and not to logic.
Right.
So there's such a thing as a contingent or a necessary being.
Right.
And if a being is necessary, then it cannot not exist.
Right.
And when this blog poster applies the concepts and categories of contingency and necessity to propositions, then I think that's a little bit of a category mistake. But again, I want to be careful because I haven't read that blog post, and there may be more to it than what you're describing. But if I do understand it correctly, I think there is a category mistake being made, because a proposition cannot be necessary or contingent. It can only be true or false. And an argument can only be valid or invalid. And so we can say that a certain conclusion of a logical argument is necessarily true, but that doesn't mean that that proposition is a necessary proposition, because necessity and contingency, those are properties of being an ontology. They're not properties of propositions. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, and you can comment on that and tell me what your thoughts are. So.
Yeah, I think he was talking about modal logic, and what he was saying is that a proposition is necessary if it is necessary that P is true. For example, if God is a necessary being, then the proposition God exists is also a necessary proposition, a necessarily true proposition. So it's linked. There is no real distinction between proposition and beings, an ontology. They both go hand to hand. So yeah, what I wanted to say is like, I asked you before, okay, what if I say that this timeless universe that somehow produces our universe, right? What if it's necessary? I can say it has the property of being necessary, and that's why it exists. And you say to me, okay, you have to prove it. You have to prove that it was necessary. Well, but I could flip. What if I flip the question? I have to say, okay, you have to prove that God is necessary. I'm not sure what do you respond to that? Will it be like the same?
Yeah, but there's a couple different ideas though that are flying around the room here, and I want to take them one at a time. You said earlier that ontology and logic are kind of go hand in hand, that they're kind of fused, and so that you can apply the modality of necessity to a proposition. And you said because that proposition is necessarily true. Yeah. And correct me if I misunderstood that. Sometimes I make mistakes, and sometimes I misunderstand what people are saying. So I really want to do my best to be accurate here. But is that right? You were talking about the fact that if a proposition is necessarily true or true by necessity, that it is a necessary proposition?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, and so I think I would have to push back on that and say I don't think you can say that a proposition is necessary. I think in logic and in modal logic in particular, the terms necessary, possible, and so on, all these categories in modal logic, they are adjectives that you apply to a proposition. So you can say that a proposition is possibly true, or you can say that a proposition is necessarily true. But what's happening is that there's a confusion of language that is occurring here, because when you use necessity as an adjective to describe the mode of a proposition in modal logic, you are not saying that that proposition is ontologically necessary, because propositions are not ontologically necessary or contingent. Propositions can only be true or false. So you could say it's bless you. You could say that it's possible that God exists. So that is a proposition. What you're saying is the proposition God exists can possibly be true. And if you want to apply modal logic, then you can say that that proposition is possibly true. But you can't say that proposition is possible, because a proposition cannot be possible. A proposition can only be true or false. So what you can say is the proposition could possibly be true, but we don't know yet. We have to suspend judgment until we can actually provide some kind of logical argument that establishes it as necessarily true. And when we say it's necessarily true, what we're saying is that there is a sound logical argument that establishes it as true. And a sound logical argument is one that is valid logically in its structure, and one that has propositions and premises in it that have been established as being true. If that's the case, if you have truth and validity, then you have soundness and you have a sound logical argument. The conclusion of a sound logical argument is necessarily true. But you can't say that that conclusion is necessary, because you're in danger of applying a property to something that cannot have that property. A proposition cannot have the property of necessity. It can only have the property of true or false. But you can say that a proposition is necessarily true. And when you say that, what you're saying is that there is a sound logical argument that establishes it as necessarily true. And if that argument has true premises, and if that argument is logically valid, then you have established that that conclusion is necessarily true. But you haven't established that that conclusion is necessary. Yeah. Those are two, and the difference between the two is extremely nuanced. It's very subtle, and it's extremely easy to confuse the two. And when I studied formal logic at the University of Iowa and the University of Colorado, my professor would just pound this into our heads constantly. He would say, people do not understand modal logic because they believe that modal logic establishes propositions as being ontologically necessary. He said, if you make that mistake in your papers, I'm going to give you an F. And so if someone does want to say that a proposition is necessary, we have to unpack that. We can't just leave it there in its present state. We have to unpack it, and we have to make sure we understand what we mean by that. And that is, when somebody says a proposition is necessary, what they really mean is it is necessarily true. And so again, I would like to read that blog post, and I want to make sure that I am not misunderstanding it. But that's kind of my
I just found a comment he made on my channel because we were talking about it. Can I read to just real quick? He was explaining what his position about an event or a thing having an explanation, a prior explanation. For example, the past event, the explanation for the past event is the previous one, and the explanation for that one is the previous one. And I say that ultimately they have no explanation. And his response was like, okay, but each of them has explanation. So ultimately, none of the members lacks an explanation. And I told him, but it's like there is no ultimate explanation. Speaking about that, by how they are contingent event, how they are contingent things, like each item in the past. And here's what he says. I'm gonna read it to you. He says, now you're talking about casually ordered series and appealing to the notion of an ultimate explanation. Each event can be explained by the immediate preceding one, but it's no ultimate explanation. That is an explanation from the entire series. But here I want to say that we know there cannot be an ultimate explanation in the widest sense. You cannot have an explanation of all contingency, else moral collapse. This is what I was saying. His blog post explained this in detail. So the only game in town is where a non-arbitrary stopping point for what can be explained is, to me, saying that the only thing that can't be explained is the sheer totality of contingent facts, each of which can be explained, is at least a plausible candidate for where the dividing line is. Anything less than the whole contingency can be explained. It has a nice feel to it as an idea, in my view. So yeah, that's what he says. So basically, he's saying like, ultimately, there is no explanation. Like one way or another, like there is no ultimate explanation. You have to appeal to something that is unexplained at the end. It seems to me like that. Like you either have to say that God is unexplained, or God was necessary, or maybe that the entirety, that the totality of contingency was necessary as a whole. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I don't want to spend too much more time on this because we have more things to talk about, but what I'm hearing is I'm not hearing a clear demarcation between epistemology and ontology. So the fact that things are contingent or necessary has more to do with metaphysics than it does epistemology. An explanation is really about epistemology. So I can explain why something exists. But when I explain why it exists, what I'm really doing is I'm identifying the cause of its existence. And so if somebody wants to say there can be no ultimate explanation, that's not necessarily an ontological claim. That sounds more like an epistemological claim to me. And I could be wrong, because I've made plenty of mistakes in the past, and I could be making one right now, but I think that it's really important for us to distinguish between the two. Metaphysics and epistemology are two separate disciplines. Explanations belong to the domain of metaphysics. And so when I say that something is contingent or necessary, what I'm saying is that if it's contingent, then it depends on something prior to it for its existence, that something caused its existence. And if something is necessary, then nothing caused its existence. It is uncaused. And the argument from contingency is classically an argument for the existence of God, because the argument from contingency says you have all sorts of reference that you can observe in the universe, and every single one of these reference depends on something prior to it for its existence. Something caused its existence. And for example, if you examine a star is a contingent referent because something caused that star to exist. It didn't cause itself. And the reason we know that is because it could have failed to exist.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then we can look around and we can identify all sorts of contingent references. And what we mean by that is every reference that we can observe with our senses is something that was caused something that was brought into existence by something else. And the argument from contingency states that you cannot have an infinite regress of causes, because that is just as logically absurd as the idea that you can have an infinite regress of time or of moments. You cannot have an infinite regress of causes, because if that's the case, then there is no first cause, and therefore the present state of affairs, the present existence of contingent reference, cannot occur. You cannot have something that exists right now that's contingent if there is an infinite regress of contingent causes. An infinite regress of contingent causes cannot produce present reality, cannot produce what actually exists, any more than the present moment cannot arrive, because an infinite past is logically impossible, just like an infinite regress of causes is also logically impossible. So when we talk about explanations, I'm starting to ramble, so I apologize. I'll wrap it up here. I know I'm going long, and I promised I wouldn't do that. Promised myself I wouldn't do that. But I think that's kind of the distinction that I think that you would have to make in order to address what this person is saying in that blog post. That you have to be careful not to confuse ontology with epistemology, and it sounds to me like that's what he's doing, but I could be mistaken. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, yeah, you said you didn't want to spend a lot of time on this. And I just have one last question. It's not super clear to me. What I asked earlier. What exactly is stopping me from saying that? I mean, that for example, the initial singularity was necessary. For example, I mean, there are things that are necessary, the contingent, like stars, planets, some things are contingent. It doesn't follow from that the initial singularity, which is completely different in nature than all the objects in the universe, that the initial singularity, for example, was also contingent. You don't know what is stopping me from saying this was necessary. You know what I mean?
Well, because the initial singularity, the initial cause of all other contingent reference is by definition necessary.
Right, that's what I say. No,
yeah.
So that's, I can say,
because if there wasn't I'm sorry, I think I interrupted. Sorry about that.
No. Go ahead.
I think to say that there is an initial being that is the cause of all other contingent reality, to say that being is contingent,
no,
is logic. Okay, to say that being.
Right. No, what if I say it is necessary? Like the singularity it was necessary. You know what I mean? Like obviously I agree that it was necessary.
Okay.
Yeah. That's so.
Okay,
basically,
I got
I'm
you.
just saying it's not God which is necessary, is a singularity which is necessary. Maybe this goes into another topic because we are not directly talking about God, right? So yeah, okay.
So at that point, then I guess my question would be, what's the difference between that singularity and God?
It's not a conscious thinking being. That's the difference.
How do you know?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it is, but maybe it's not. That's my point. We don't know if it is, right? We cannot prove it. Maybe it is.
Right. Well, there are other arguments that like the argument from contingency points back to an initial non-contingent necessary being. And as soon as you talk about a necessary being, then you have to start asking questions as to what the nature of that necessary being has to be. And there's a whole lot more data that you would have to accumulate and you'd have to consider in order to try to identify. And this points to the question that you asked when we were planning this debate. You said, can we talk about what that singularity would be like and what the initial cause of everything would be like? And we're getting into that territory, actually. Because, I wish I am kicking myself because I wrote an article one time about the initial non-contingent being that caused the rest of contingent reality, and I can't find that article, and I am so upset with myself for losing it. It was very clumsy of me to lose it. But the basic drift of the article was that people who deny the existence of God say that there could have been some kind of non-contingent being or reality that caused the rest of the cause and effect relationships and the rest of the cause and effect chain that then began to be set in motion, and that produced all of the contingent beings and reference that we can observe, including us, by the way.
Yeah.
And my question is, the question that the article asked was the same question I just asked you. What's the difference between that and God? Because what they're saying is that initial singularity, that initial necessary being that caused all the rest of contingent reality had to have always existed.
Yeah.
And if it always existed, but contingent reality had a beginning, then if that initial singularity caused the existence of the rest of contingent reality, then wasn't there a moment where that non-contingent reality decided to cause the existence of contingent reality? And it sounds a whole lot like creation to me. Sounds a whole lot like a personal being who chose to create. And whenever people start talking about the initial singularity that is not God, but is something else, my question is, what is that something else, and what's the difference between that and God? Because it would have to have all the characteristics that we normally ascribe to God. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I get it. Yeah. I think the word decide there would be controversial. I think maybe you kind of sneak it in somehow a bit. Like, is decide really the word? Because in a way, yeah, I agree. It sounds very weird to me. How can a material thing, a non-conscious thing, just like exist for an infinite amount of time, but then suddenly cause a universe? It's very weird. I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. But it is also weird to say.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think that is, and I would call it more than weird. I would call it.
Yeah.
I would call it incoherent, actually.
Absurd,
but but go ahead. And
I agree, even absurd. But here's the thing: doesn't a conscious being have the same problem? But look, what you're saying is God was basically sitting there for an infinite amount of time, and then it suddenly decided to create the universe. But it's also weird because he's like, in a way, it's also weird because it's like, William Lane Craig says this is a decision on libertarian freedom, an unconscious decision. But for me, this is a free decision. But for me, this sounds more like a random decision. We need to differentiate, because it's like out of nowhere, for no reason. I've been sitting here for an infinite amount of time. I always had the capacity to create. I have always had the will to create because it doesn't change. But now I suddenly decide to do it. It feels like a random decision, a weird random decision, not a free decision. So that would be my issue with that.
Well, when you talk about the potential existence of God as existing for an infinite amount of time, you're already landing in incoherent territory right there.
Okay.
Because God did not exist for an infinite amount of time.
Yes.
There was no time prior to creation.
I get it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But the other angle to approach this from, and tell me if I'm not being very clear here, because again, I sometimes I have a habit of not being very good at putting my thoughts into words. So if I'm being incoherent, or if it doesn't make sense to you, let me know, and I'll try to help clarify it, make it more understandable. But I've got it in my head, I'm just trying to get it out into the air. If you want to talk about an initial necessary singularity, is what you called it. So some kind of singularity, some kind of being that exists, and that it is a necessary thing
Yes.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And that thing was the cause of all other existence, all contingent existence that we can identify now.
Yeah.
Then if that's the case, then the necessary and sufficient conditions for that singularity to cause all the rest of existence was always there.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Yeah. That's the problem. That's the problem. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that the idea that an initial singularity that was a necessary referent that caused the existence of everything else, I think that's incoherent if it's impersonal. Because an impersonal singularity that suddenly causes the rest of all of existence, if that's the case, then the necessary and sufficient conditions always existed. And if that's the case, then it would have it would have caused that existence from eternity past,
Yes.
always.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
And so that's kind of where the where the sticking point is.
Yeah. I have the same
that makes
problem.
sense. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So that's our 30 minutes for the informal discussion part there. So at this point, I did see a few questions coming in, so that's great. We're going to go to the 5-minute closings. In the meantime, for the audience, remember to ask your questions. Try to ask for both the debaters, for both Phil and Juan, and put at Reason and Theology, just so Michael can pick them up and star them. But for right now, we're going to go to the conclusions, starting with Phil. So you have 5 minutes. Let me know. Are you ready to go?
Sure.
All right. So 3, 2, 1.
Yes. So first of all, I want to just say that Juan, this has been enjoyable and productive, just like our last discussion was. And so I want to express my gratitude to you, Juan, because again, you are a class act. You're thoughtful, you ask questions, and when you have trouble understanding something, you actually admit it. And there are so many debaters in this habitat that will not admit that they don't understand something. They will claim to understand it and claim to try to explain it, and they will claim that their debating opponent doesn't understand it and is somehow coming to the table with some kind of dismal failure on their part or something like that. So when you're honest about what you don't understand, and I so appreciate that. That to me, that is worth its weight in gold. But you also have a lot of good ideas, and you're thinking about these things deeply. And so I congratulate you on that as well. I think I guess as my closing comments are concerned, I think what I would want to say is that I think the infinite regress of time, I don't think that it has actually been challenged very well at this point. I think that there are different ways that you can interact with an argument. One way that you can interact with an argument is to accept its conclusion because you recognize that the argument is sound. Another way that you can interact with an argument is to refute it and to actually offer a counter argument or offer the identification of a logical fallacy or a factual error in that argument. And so that's what happens when you actually refute an argument. The third thing that you can do with an argument is dismiss it. And I see the third alternative occurring in these discussions more often than the other two by a wide margin. And there are times when, with all respect and affection, there are times when I think, Juan, that you have not refuted the arguments that I presented. Sometimes I think that what you're doing is dismissing them. and you're dismissing them with language that sounds like, I just don't see how that could be true, or I just don't see that that's necessarily true, or whatever. And if you do that, and you might not be doing that, and I don't want to make any accusation. I'm just trying to kind of make an observation, and that is that when people dismiss an argument or dismiss a conclusion because they just can't see it, or they can't see why it has to be true, then that can easily run into what's called the fallacy of incredulity. And so, in my humble opinion, I think there are times when you have actually dismissed my arguments instead of actually refuted them. Because to refute an argument takes a lot of work, and it's something that requires a great deal of logical analysis. And so I think I would encourage you to do your best to try to engage with arguments more, and I think we should try to do less of this I just can't see why that has to be true kind of rhetoric. But I don't think that the arguments that I presented were actually refuted. And so I think that they stand. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily sound. Just because somebody hasn't refuted an argument doesn't mean that the argument is sound. And so, but I do think that the contingency argument and the time stretching back to an infinite past, that logical incoherence, I think those are strong arguments. And I don't think that they have actually been challenged to a significant degree today. But I would like to address a lot of the material that you have referred to. And I have a whole lot more to learn about this subject matter. And so I want to state those claims, and I know they're kind of bold claims, but I also want to say at the same time that I still have a lot to learn, and I think it'd be good for me to be able to read some of this material that you're referring to, because I think I can learn from it, and they might present challenges, and those challenges might not actually refute my arguments, but they might help me in strengthening them. One to the others is perfectly possible, you know. So that's kind of my. I don't know if I went over, but
yeah, you're about 10 seconds over, but mostly you're in line perfectly. So great,
okay.
Great conclusion there. So all right, Juan, you have 5 minutes on the clock to give your conclusion statement. So are you ready to go?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
So 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here, and also thank you, Phil, for talking to me again. These have been two great discussions. I think I was very enjoyable for me as well. You're very knowledgeable. I didn't go the last time that you studied philosophy and logic. That's very cool, I think. So yeah, I just learned it today. Okay. What I presented, what I consider to be my main argument, is that I was trying to appeal to modern physics in saying that maybe time is more complex than we think, and it's not like so intuitive. There's a lot of, as one might think, a lot of around this can be very unintuitive. But yet, when we look at the quantum world and the cosmological world, it is true. There are crazy stuff like that. And one of the things I try to mention is that the ultimate physical reality could have a timeless aspect, that there are physical models that propose this, and it will count as the universe not having a beginning. And what Phil said, I think, if I understood correctly, is like, okay, but where is the evidence for that? And just because there hasn't been any clear evidence to this it's not the same as proving that these models are true. Like he would say that you have to do more than that to like actually prove these models. I think maybe that's what he said, if I got it right. I would simply say that if these models are mathematically coherent and are considered, they are taken seriously by physics and philosophers of science, they are seriously considered as possible contenders for explaining why, how the universe came to be. This like it's also based on real data. I don't have it, to be honest. I don't have knowledge that deep to that level, but yeah, I mean, there's some data about that. And yeah, about the argument for an infinite regress, okay, I admit, okay, I can concede that for me it's very difficult to refute this argument. In fact, if you go to my channel, you see a community post from like a few days ago. I was asking people, I was asking people, how do you respond to that? Because I don't get like how to respond to this correctly. And I had a long discussion with Alex Malpass there. People can go see it. He said a lot of interesting things. And basically, what he said basically is like, yeah, you can't transverse an infinite amount of moments if you have infinite time. Like he said, there is no logical contradiction in there. So that's what basically boils down to. But you can see more about it. And Alex Malpass has done a lot of videos on it. He had a debate with William Lane Craig, which is very interesting. Is the universe had a beginning? That's super. I recommend that. There's also a debate between Daniel Linford, who worked a lot with Alex Malpass, and Andrew Locke on this topic. Does the universe have a beginning? I got some of this information from that debate, so I can recommend that to people if they want to go deeper on this. And also, yeah, Alex Malpass basically has done a lot of it. And yeah, I agree that this argument is mostly based on intuition. But what I think is there is no a true logical contradiction involving why an infinite past cannot exist. It hasn't been truly offered. That's what I see it this way. So it hasn't been like strictly disproven. That's what I would say. And that's all for my side.
All right, cool. All right, so that does it for the concluding statements and for the debate. At this point, before we end and you guys give the plugs, I'm going to bring in my facilitator to give the audience questions. So, Michael, if you're still there, you're up. Oh,
you're muted.
Thank you for letting me. Yeah, no, I had mute on the soundboard. Okay.
Did you take a nap?
No, I've been here. Okay, so Liliana is asking a question here. If every part of the universe is contingent, meaning it could have failed to exist, then what holds all of it in existence right now? So question for both. So maybe starting with you, Phil.
Well, actually, there are different ways that you can answer that question. There could be a scientific answer, there could be a philosophical answer, but I would actually give it a theological answer. I think there is a theological answer to that question, because in Christian theology, God is the creator of all things, and he is also the sustainer of all things, so that he sustains all of existence. Now, I know that that's not a scientific answer, and it wouldn't satisfy, or a lot of scientists probably wouldn't like it. But I'm not sure that naturalism can actually explain what holds everything into continued existence at the present moment. So, and the other question that I would have is it necessary that something has to hold all of everything in existence right now? I mean, if everything simply exists because it has a cause and it's been caused to exist, then if it's going to continue to exist, then the same thing that caused it to exist is causing it to continue to exist. And so I think that's a logical possibility in my view. So,
okay, Juan.
Okay, I will appeal to explain what holds all of existence, like to exist. I will appeal to a concept called existential inertia. There is something that has been worked on by Joe Smith for Majesty of Reason explains it. The idea is basically this: things don't need to be held in existence. Okay, once they exist, then what happens is that they will continue to exist in the absence of destructive forces that made them non-exist. So in other words, once a thing exists, the default is to continue to exist. You don't need to explain why it doesn't go out of existence. It won't, right? It's the default, basically.
Good answer.
Thanks.
Okay. To Juan, why didn't you answer the question, did the universe have a beginning?
Well, I think my answer is it is possible that it has not, that is beginningless. Because I don't know the answer. Okay, that will be my answer to that question. But I think the position I try to defend is it is possible that it has a beginning. Did it had a beginning? I don't know actually. So yeah, to be honest.
Phil, did you have any interaction for that?
Well, I think Juan's being perfectly honest. I think what he's saying is that he wanted to defend. He didn't want to defend the stronger position. He wanted to defend the weaker position. That it's plausible that it did not have a beginning. And so, if the person that's asking this question wants to say that Juan didn't actually answer the question, I'm not really sure that I would want to go that far. I think that Juan answered the question honestly, and so I wouldn't criticize him for his answer just because he chose to answer it in the way that he did. So,
Okay. Okay, to Phil, why have you not addressed the fact that God does not fit into the casual argument? Any thoughts
that
on
God
that?
does not fit in. That God does not fit into the causal argument.
That's what it says. Causal argument. Yeah.
Causal argument.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm not sure that I understand the question. I'm not sure what the person asking means by the causal argument. I mean, I think there are arguments for the existence of God that has to do with the fact that everything that has a beginning has a cause, and that and God is certainly relevant in that argument as far as that the cause of the existence of the universe would have to have certain attributes, and those attributes are consistent with what we normally call God. So I guess I'm not really sure if I really understand the question and whether or not I've actually answered it adequately.
Yeah. Juan, did you have any interaction for that one?
No, I don't see. When did we establish that God doesn't fit into the causal argument? We never said. I don't know why he said this. I don't get it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think either Juan and I, neither of us actually said that. So have I not addressed it? I don't know. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Not a very good answer, I guess.
So to Phil, what about the time that was before the universe when there was heaven and hell and God's throne and so on?
I don't think that was a time before the universe. I think that heaven and hell and God's throne, all those are creations. So God created heaven, God created hell, and I don't think there was a time before that. Universe began to exist before there was a heaven and hell and all those various other things.
Juan, did you have any interaction
Yeah.
with that?
Well, yeah, I think there is an interesting idea behind it, and one could ask an interesting question: do events happen in heaven? But you just say that first God created the universe, and then there was heaven. So I don't know about that. But if someone say that there was a heavenly realm before God created like material earth, right? And he said that there was a war in heaven and Lucifer rebelled and all that. I mean, but these events in heaven, do they need time to happen, right? Do you know what I mean? Like maybe one could ask an interesting question like this: in heaven or something, is there time? Do events, and if there is no time, how can events happen, right? Or something like that. You know what I mean?
Okay. I don't see any others. So it looks like that may conclude our Q&A portion here. Those were the only ones that I was able to find.
Fair enough.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. So yeah, at this point, I think we'll do the customary reason and theology send off by letting each the guests, give your plugs. Where can people go to find you? Phil, we'll start with you.
Yeah, you can find me right here on my couch. So anytime anybody wants to come and visit me, they can find me anytime. This is it's my couch potato podcast location. But yeah, I'm on YouTube. I have a podcast called The Cross to Bear, and the podcast is about theology, philosophy, apologetics, biblical studies, and I'm beginning to actually enhance my podcast and my ministry to include discipleship and prayer. And I think that's something that can sometimes be missing from the apologetics community. Sometimes it can need to be a little bit divorced from or isolated from discipleship and prayer. And I think that all those things should be integrated. So I think if you just look me up on YouTube, just type in a search for Phil Bear. I think it's youtube.com/@PhilBear. I think it's the actual channel name, if I'm not mistaken. I should know it better than that. I'm also on Substack, and I am on Facebook. I have a very modest number of followers on Facebook. I'm also an admin in the Mere Molinism Facebook group, and so I've had a close association with Dr. Tim Stratton in our discussions about Molinism. And so those are some of the places where you can find me. And I have a website, philbear.org, and that's the home of my prayer app. I have a prayer app called Supplica, and that has been an enormous help for my prayer life and so on. So I wanted to make it available to other people in case they were struggling with their prayer life the way that I have for an embarrassing number of decades. So I can't think of anything else.
Yeah,
I live in Denver, Colorado, and so if somebody wants to hunt me down, they can come to Denver and they can look me up.
All right, awesome. So yeah, Juan, say over to you again. Make any plugs. Where can people go to find you?
Yeah, I only have a YouTube channel. I don't have so many things. It's called Modern Atheism, and that's where you can find me.
All right, awesome. Yeah, well, great debate tonight. Very civil, and I appreciate both of you guys for coming on, and I appreciate Michael for facilitating this debate on his channel. So, yeah, great night, everyone, and yeah, take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time. Thank y'all. Bye-bye.
Yep.